Welcome everybody. I'm just sharing my video just for the beginning of this presentation, just to say hello to you all. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to view this presentation, and I'll just click over to the PowerPoint now. Hi, okay, so my name is JODIE POOLE and I'm a technical sales consultant for LIMS. I'm based in Perth, Australia. Thanks for joining this presentation, which is entitled Turning Your Laboratory into a Profit Centre by Implementing LIMS. AutoScribe Informatics is a global provider of configurable future-proof solutions for laboratories. We are supported by our distributor in Indonesia, PT AGRIYA ANALITIKA, who are experts in LIMS. If you have any questions as a follow-up to this presentation, you can email me or you can email Victor in our Indonesian office, and all the details are on the screen. Also in attendance today, so he will be taking some questions and answers after the session. Either in English or Indonesian, whichever you're comfortable with. So let's take a closer look at how a LIMS can benefit your business. So we're going to cover the following items today. We'll look at profit and where does it come from. We'll talk about laboratory pressures. We will talk about how we can drive efficiency through the laboratory with flow-on effects to the business as a whole. We'll look at what a LIMS is. We'll talk about how you can protect your brand reputation. We'll look at the benefits of moving towards a paperless environment. I'm going to touch on ISO 17025 and other regulatory requirements. And then we'll move on to some specific information around LIMS, such as integration with instruments and other systems, managing your client relationships, and managing your resources, again, to enable you to be more productive and more profitable for your organisation. We'll also look at data analytics and how these can help you to make better business decisions. So profit is arguably the most important part of the business. Traditionally, it is seen to come from manufactured product and sales, which is true. The QC lab is often seen as a cost centre by senior managers who only see the amount spent and the problems that occur. Testing is often viewed as a necessary evil rather than a means to producing accurate results leading to the best quality product. QC labs are often understaffed, having to work under pressure, with staff needing to work overtime to meet the demand. I'm sure many of you can relate to this situation. With the well-organised lab using a LIMS, the same staff can get through their work faster under less pressure, producing better outcomes for the business as a whole. So we need to justify the purchase of a LIMS through the value that it will add to the business. We all know that time is money. Getting your results out quickly is very important. How long does it take you from completing the test to releasing the results? Where are your bottlenecks? Do you have a manufacturing department that are demanding results before they are ready for release? Are there shipments of product waiting to be sent and waiting for results before that final decision can be made? What sort of pressures do you have in your laboratory? I'm sure you have pressure to turn around samples and results more quickly. We always have pressure on us to improve the quality to meet ISO, GMP, GLP regulations. Pressure to reduce our costs. And pressure to meet our regulatory compliance requirements. We have a constant demand for better management reports from the laboratory. And there's a constant juggle to manage resources efficiently. So whether that be your staff, your equipment, or your supplies. Now, this is just a small list of pressures that I'm sure, again, many of you can relate to. It is by no means an exhaustive list, and I'm sure you could identify many more. Improving security as well is another big one for many labs these days. Why is the laboratory put under so much pressure? Most businesses are ultimately looking for maximum efficiency. So that's maximum productivity with minimum expense or effort. So we want to achieve compliance to our set regulations, get results out faster, reduce our errors, and reduce rework. Now, to be honest, we don't always need a LIMS to manage a laboratory. So if you don't have a LIMS, you may be working with a folder system, spreadsheets, notebooks, pieces of paper, or a combination of the above. The key here is that a LIMS will allow you to perform all of the required lab functions in one place. It can help to increase productivity and drive efficiencies. And as we go through this presentation, I'll show you some specific examples of this. So let's just come back a step and talk about what a LIMS is fundamentally. So a LIMS is a laboratory information management system. It is used to control the flow of samples through your laboratory. So we will always have some kind of workflow with a LIMS. And you can see here a screenshot of a LIMS, and you can see we're starting with some sample registration information at the beginning. We may work through the system, receive some samples, prepare the samples. We need to do some result entry at some point. At some point, we will need to approve samples, produce some reports, and maybe even issue an invoice from the LIMS. A LIMS will also have some kind of reporting type capability. So in this case, we have dashboards on the screen. But there's more to LIMS than simply controlling your workflow and issuing test results. Now, for a business, obviously brand is very important. And the cost of getting things wrong, whether that's in terms of financial cost or bad publicity, far exceeds the cost of putting measures in place to ensure protection of the brand. I'm going to go through a few examples to illustrate this point. So the first example is from the pharmaceutical industry. This is a lab based in India, Ranbaxy. They were found to be falsifying data and lab results, resulting in having to pay out almost $500 million in fines to US authorities. They were also banned from supplying the product to the US. Now, they don't exist anymore. They were bought out by Sun Pharmaceuticals, but this scandal had a huge negative impact on the company. The next example is from the food industry. So back in 2008, there was an incident where melamine was used to increase the nitrogen content of diluted milk, giving it the appearance of higher protein content in order to pass quality control testing. Unfortunately, not only did 6 babies die with thousands hospitalized, it also had a huge damaging effect on the reputation of China's food export industry. It also meant that Fonterra had to pay out compensation claims totaling around $700 million. In a more recent example, and this is shocking really given the technology that we have available today, but Public Health England were found to have lost almost 16,000 test records because they were managing their track and trace for coronavirus using Microsoft Excel. And this meant that there were thousands of people out there who potentially had coronavirus but were unaware of it. So they were going about their normal business, spreading the virus further and putting other people's lives at risk. So it is important that your business has a secure system, one that can meet the required quality standards and meet your data requirements to protect your business reputation. So have a think about what would your total recall costs be? What would be the cost of your future lost business? Remember, your business is built on quality and trust. So by implementing a LIMS, you can move towards a more paperless environment. You can minimize manual entry, and this therefore reduces the errors. Manual entry of results can lead to poor product, not meeting specifications, and ultimately could lead to recalls and lawsuits. By going paperless, you increase the quality of the data that you're producing. And again, this helps you to meet your regulatory requirements. You eliminate folders and filing cabinets, making information much easier to locate because it's all in one system electronically. So for example, when you have auditors coming to visit, you'll be much more easily able to find the information that you need. By going paperless and implementing a LIMS, it is much more easy to cross-reference and trend data across different batches. And implementing a LIMS allows you to manage your business processes and not your paper documents. All of this, again, leads to increased productivity for the business as a whole. So some examples. This is just to give you some insight into studies that have, again, taken place in the past. In the first example, there was a study conducted in a critical care setting in the ICU at Glasgow Royal Infirmary, where it was found that 8.8% of errors in blood results were due to transcription errors. The data also showed that there was a greater chance of those errors occurring in the afternoon rather than the morning, which is quite interesting. Another study that was done at the University of Hawaii looked at 13 field audits involving real-world spreadsheets and found that 88% of 113 spreadsheets contained errors. Some of those may have been major errors, so perhaps calculations, and others may have been quite minor errors, such as incorrect rounding or spelling mistakes. So these errors may seem small, but they could be critical to auditors or to your customers. And the last example here was a study that the Royal Society of Chemistry published a few years ago. And what they were looking to do was to see where major errors were whilst doing chemical analysis. What they found was that the biggest contributor was actually down to human error, and significant improvements were needed to reduce the errors in chemical analysis. Now, there are some references down the bottom, which might be difficult to see on a small screen. If anyone is interested in a copy of this presentation afterwards, we'd be more than happy to supply that to you. So these are some examples that have come from actually a couple of our customers in Indonesia, where they were looking at how their productivity had improved with implementing a LIMS. So you can see on the left-hand side of the table, we have some current processes that they looked at, which those processes were in place before the LIMS and then after the LIMS was implemented. So starting at the top with sample reception, it was taking around 5 minutes on average to register a sample or receive a sample. Before a LIMS was implemented, they noticed there were lots of typing errors, there were errors producing labels, and there was a lot of manual document movement needed to track the sample. With a LIMS, The errors were reduced or eliminated, and it was much easier to track the movement of the sample. So the time dropped from 5 minutes to 1 minute with a 400% productivity increase. For their test results reporting, it used to take 10 minutes. They had to summarize results. They had to use a combination of Word and Excel, and someone had to find the lab manager to manually sign every report that went out. With the LIMS, the summary was automated. The third-party software no longer needed to be used. Everything was issued from the LIMS, and a digital signature was applied, or an electronic signature, to the reports, reducing the time to 1 minute and realizing a 900% productivity increase. Recording results from instruments used to take 1.5 minutes. This was a manual recording, and there were often misreadings or, again, typing errors. With the LIMS, the results were automatically imported, which eliminates all human error. Takes next to no time at all to import a result from an instrument, and a huge increase in productivity with that process. With tracking of samples, there used to be a logbook method. People struggled with reading bad handwriting. Again, there were typing errors, and there were often many cases of duplicate sample IDs being referenced. With a LIMS, there is a complete audit trail tracking the samples. A database search is much faster. The complete sample information is always in the system, such as the physical location, the position, perhaps within a storage rack, and there was never any issues around duplicate IDs. And again, a huge increase in productivity with that process now taking 1 minute. This particular lab also used to produce a monthly inventory control report. They had to collect multiple data from multiple laboratories. There might be the microbiology laboratory, a physical testing laboratory, and to compile all of that information would take up to 45 minutes. With a LIMS, it keeps a complete log of all transactions with results available immediately. So again, reducing from 45 minutes down to 5 minutes, and an 800% improvement to productivity. So again, these are specific examples that have come out from 2 labs that we've worked with implementing LIMS in Indonesia. So as many of you will know, ISO 17025 is the international standard for testing and calibration laboratories. It is a set of requirements that laboratories use to show that they operate a quality management system and that they're technically competent to do the work that they do. By achieving ISO 17025 accreditation, your customers can be confident that you know what you're doing and that you understand or control the way in which you do it. Therefore, customers can trust the quality of the information and data that you are sharing with them. This is becoming increasingly important as companies are collaborating and sharing data more and more. And as we've seen in the slides earlier, there are serious consequences if that quality of data cannot be trusted. So how can we do this? How can the validity of a result be assured? And how do you demonstrate that your laboratory is competent to perform the tests to make your laboratory more attractive to collaborators and clients? So the answer to that problem is to use digital and computer-based systems to help support the requirements and intent of ISO 17025. So specifically, a LIMS or laboratory information management system will support this process. A LIMS or a quality LIMS will provide specific functionality that is integrated with the workflow that we looked at earlier and management tools. So it's not just the workflow that you need to think about when implementing a LIMS. You need to think about what is behind each workflow step and how can this support your compliance with ISO 17025. So we'll look at a few very specific examples now around how a LIMS can support your move towards ISO 17025, which has a flow-on effect to increasing the productivity and the profitability of your business. So the first point I'd like to discuss is an improvement to turnaround time with integration. So this is a diagram depicting integration to an instrument, from the LIMS to the instrument. So by integrating your instruments, you can improve the result recording accuracy, avoiding manual transcription errors. You can connect your instruments a variety of different ways, perhaps using an API or file interfaces. This will allow you to get your results to your customers more quickly, so you can obtain results, approve samples and results, and create certificates of analyses faster. So have a think about, in your laboratory, what instruments could you interface? How much time would this save you? And what additional profits would that allow you to generate? Now, a quality LIMS will have an instrument calibration and maintenance system to provide a record of all your pieces of equipment in your laboratory. So this is a screenshot from a typical LIMS. I'm not going to go through it in too much detail, but I just want to point out that we have a list of instruments displayed on the screen, and the colours allow us to quickly see which ones are in calibration. So anything in green is ready to be used, and anything in red is out of calibration or out of service. We have at the bottom of the screen some actions that need to be performed to bring the instrument back into service or back into calibration. And these can be set on a schedule. So you may have a calibration that needs to be performed once per month for a particular instrument, and you can set a schedule for that. We have a full audit trail. So through the event history button, we can access a complete audit trail of all actions that have been performed on every piece of equipment in our laboratory. We can attach files or documents against an instrument. So this may be things like a manual, an operating procedure, or it may be a YouTube video that shows you how to operate the instrument, or service records. And these can all be quickly and easily located simply by clicking on the button in the LIMS. This allows you again to move towards a paperless lab where you no longer have to store the manuals for the instrument on a shelf in your laboratory. And an instrument calibration and maintenance module should have a comprehensive set of management reports for a particular instrument. This may be things like when it was last calibrated, by whom, how often was it calibrated in the last month. And those reports allow you to gather some insight into the activity or productivity for that piece of equipment over the last year, for example. It gives you visibility and allows you to make decisions more easily with data available to support those decisions. So having this sort of module helps to facilitate compliance with ISO 17025, which also aids the business in providing a quality offering, making your business more attractive to collaborators and customers. So have a think about, within your laboratory, how do you know that your instruments are properly maintained and calibrated? Where are your instrument manuals? If an auditor comes to visit, would everyone be able to find them? And are your test results valid? Were those tests performed on an instrument that was in service? Another type of interfacing that a LIMS will facilitate is an interface to third-party systems. So you can your laboratory can realise efficiencies with automated interfaces. That may be via an API or other interfacing methodologies. This may be, for example, a link to your ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning System, to a manufacturing execution system, or to a PIMS, a Process Information Management System, or Plant Information Management System. These interfaces reduce the amount of errors as data is transferred from one part of the business to the other. You may, for example, want to import inspection plans and inspection lots from your MES into a LIMS. And from the LIMS, you may wish to send batch usage decisions and analytical results back into your third-party system. This allows critical business decisions to be made in real time, increasing the speed at which the product can be released, and therefore increasing profitability for the company as a whole. Now, another area where a LIMS can help you to become more productive and more profitable is in your client relationships. So if you have a LIMS, your clients may be able to access information remotely, for example, through a website. They may be able to access quotes that you've generated. They may be able to register some samples that they're then going to ship to you. They can check their sample status. So they could check if a particular sample has actually been received by the laboratory or if it's currently in process. They may be able to look up results from their analysis. Your customers may be able to access their reports. And of course, all of these options would be controlled by security within the LIMS. So you'd want to make sure that your clients can only access their samples through a secure system, and that can all be built in through LIMS security. Other common examples that we see when implementing LIMS is emailing of reports. So a customer may want you to email a certificate of analysis or report to them as soon as the results have been authorized. A customer may want to receive a text message as soon as a sample has arrived. So no longer do you have to waste time on the phone with people calling you, asking if you have actually received their samples. Now, remote access also extends to the people within your lab. So, for example, a laboratory manager could perform work and make business decisions from home. And we're seeing this again increasingly in the current business environment where countries are going into lockdown, and lab managers can actually log into the LIMS and authorize work and look up results from home or from a remote location. Also, remember that if you're in a manufacturing QC environment, your manufacturing staff are also your clients. So they may be able to query results and sample statuses without bothering you to find out those details. So what if the results are out of specification for a particular batch? You may have a text message that automatically goes to the head of manufacturing, and they may be able to save a particular batch from rework or potentially rework the products a little more quickly in the process so that it saves potentially having to discard the whole batch. So your resources within your laboratory also need to be managed efficiently to improve the profitability for the business. An inventory management system is a fundamental component of a quality LIMS, and this will help you to manage your inventory efficiently. This may be an inventory of your physical samples that you take as part of a manufacturing process, whether that be your raw materials that you start with, in-process samples or finished product. A LIMS will also allow you to manage laboratory consumables, reagents and chemicals. So again, here is a screenshot from a LIMS, and you can see in the middle of the screen a list of all of the inventory that we have currently in our laboratory. There's an option to add new items of inventory. The inventory can be assigned a status. So we have some inventory that has been potentially disposed, or it may be in quarantine. It may have been received into the lab. You can also put your inventory into a particular location. So here we have a hierarchical storage location, and we can see that this particular piece of inventory is in a storage cupboard. This way, everyone in the lab knows where to find that particular item of inventory. Now, your inventory could be an everyday consumable, it could be a raw material, or perhaps you have to make up your own solutions and buffers. A quality LIMS will allow you to store recipes and create recipes so that you have extra visibility of what the actual raw materials are and what reagents were used. And you can track back to when they were purchased and how much is left. So to summarize, a quality LIMS with an inventory management system allows you to comprehensively manage your resource and therefore ensure that efficiency is maintained, driving productivity and profitability of the organisation from the lab. Another resource that a LIMS can help you to manage is your staff. How do you manage your staff training records and competencies? How do you record your staff training? A LIMS allows you to store training courses against individuals, competency levels, dates, and renewal periods. You'll be able to attach files within the LIMS, for example, training certificates. A LIMS will also flag if a person can be assigned a task for preparation or testing of samples. If, for example, they haven't been trained on a particular instrument, that person will not be allowed to be assigned a particular test. A lab manager can set up the system to generate warnings or reminders when training is due. So once again, a LIMS will allow you to ensure that you have enough staff trained to remain efficient and productive throughout the year. So the last area that I'd like to cover today is data analytics and visualization. This allows you to graphically present data to provide powerful business intelligence for your laboratory and organisation. Now, this may be through dashboards inherently configured within the LIMS, or if you need a little bit more of a powerful tool, you can link from the LIMS to third-party analytics tools such as Power BI or Tableau and various other options. This will allow you to speed up the decision-making process and again, increase profitability for the business as a whole. So we'll start just quickly by looking at a LIMS dashboard. So this is the LIMS screen that I showed you earlier. We talked about the workflow at the top of the screen and the dashboard at the bottom. I'm just going to zoom in on that dashboard section so you can see in a bit more detail. So this is a very simple dashboard. It just gives you a snapshot of all of the different samples that are currently registered in our system and the different statuses that they have within the system. So you can see at a glance that we've got a lot of samples sitting in the prepared area that need to move through to be tested and approved and reported. So we can see there's a bit of a bottleneck straight away in our laboratory in that area. This is a screen showing a LIMS link to Power BI. So we can see again here just a different depiction of all the outstanding samples within our laboratory and the different statuses, again with different colours on the pie chart. We can see here's a graph showing year by year how many samples we have approved within the system. And on the right-hand side, there's just a snapshot of samples with the submitter and the different substances of all those samples that have been submitted today. Another example, this is also a link between a LIMS and Power BI. We can see a depiction of a country here, and we can see that the size of the circle represents the number of samples coming in from different locations. And again, this is allowing us to make better business decisions around where the bulk of our work comes from. And this may help us, for example, to plan a different courier route. So if we need to ensure there's more courier transport coming from different areas, or if we're considering opening up a new laboratory in a different area, this may help to guide us on where that lab should be located. And finally, just another example of a link to Power BI. We can see a list of samples by showing test revenue per month. So year on year, we can see where we're generating the most revenue. And down the bottom, we can see all the tests that we perform in the lab. And again, year on year, we can see how much revenue we're generating from each of those tests, again, to drive decisions on where we may wish to invest in extra staff, extra training, and extra instrumentation. So just in summary, so we talked about the business benefits of a LIMS and how this can drive productivity, primarily through increased efficiency. So by linking islands of data, so linking the data between your instruments, your people, your workflow, all of this allows you to view the information in one place and make better business decisions. We talked about abolishing transcription errors with the LIMS. We talked about how you can release results faster, eliminate recalls, and potentially allow clients to have direct access through a website into their results. We talked about doing more with the same resources, so that's covering your inventory, your staff, and your equipment. With a LIMS, you will never lose data. So even if you archive data in a LIMS, it'll always be in the database and you can always recall it instantly. A LIMS allows you to create business insights with statistics and reporting, driving improvement to your quality, such as your ISO 17025, GXP, 21 CFR Part 11 compliance, managing the risk and liability. So a LIMS allows you in many different ways to unlock the profit in your business. If you're interested in learning more about how a LIMS can help you, we have additional resources available at the following link. You'll find some very helpful information that will be relevant across all LIMS. So things like justifying the purchase of a LIMS, how to buy a LIMS, so some helpful hints on the sorts of questions you need to be asking. There's a user requirements checklist that you can download. And there's also some brochures around different laboratory systems that you can use to get more information. So in summary, I'd like to thank you all for attending today. As discussed at the beginning, my details are on the screen. I'm more than happy for you to contact me directly, or if you prefer to go direct to our distributor in Indonesia, the details are on the screen at the bottom there for AGRIYA Analitika. So I'm going to hand over to Victor now, who is going to answer your questions if you have any. And thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Jodie. We still have like around 6 minutes-ish. So if you have any questions, kalau misalnya Bapak Ibu ada pertanyaan, silahkan bisa digunakan tombol Q&A-nya di bagian bawah. Oke, jadi ada beberapa pertanyaan mengenai materi dari presentasi hari ini. Jadi semua materi yang Bapak Ibu lihat saat ini akan kami kirimkan minggu depan setelah Lab Indonesia ini selesai, hari ini terakhir ya. Kalau misalnya nanti ada yang mau ditanyakan, mungkin bisa email langsung ke office@agriya-analitika.com yang Bapak Ibu bisa lihat di layar. Okay, Jodie, I think most of our attendees are already leaving now, and we're running short on time. So we should just close it. Oke, terima kasih semuanya atas kehadirannya. Kalau misalnya ada pertanyaan, silahkan kontak kami di office@agriya-analitika.com. Thank you.
Thank you.